The trouble started on a Tuesday morning when I opened my front door and found a bright orange violation notice duct taped to my mailbox. In big, bold letters, non-compliant outbuilding tool shed access required by HOA. I stared at it for a good minute, wondering what sort of delusional power trip this was. My name's Lawson Merrick. I'm a 38-year-old contractor, which means I work early, haul tools, and mind my business. I built that shed myself in my backyard on my property line, up to code and fully permitted. But apparently the HOA wanted a key. A key to my tool shed. Just as I was tearing the notice off, I heard her heels clicking up the sidewalk. "Good morning, Mr. Merrick," chirped Velma Gregson, the head of the HOA board, clipboard clutched like she was ready to write me a parking ticket. Velma was a 50-something bleach blonde with a permanent scowl and a voice like a rusty wind chime. "You got our notice?" she asked, gesturing at the mangled duct tape in my hand. "Yeah. And I'm gonna guess there's a mistake, because there's no way you're legally allowed to ask for a key to my shed." "Oh, but we are," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard like she was revealing classified intel. Per Section 8 of the Architectural Compliance Addendum, all structures must be accessible to the HOA for inspection at any time. I raised an eyebrow. Even private, locked sheds with no shared utilities or HOA-funded structures? She didn't blink. "Yes. And we'll need the key by the end of the week. Otherwise, fines will begin accruing. $50 per day." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "You really think I'm giving you a key to where I store thousands of dollars worth of tools?" Velma's smile flattened. "Non-compliance will be escalated." With that, she turned on her heel and strutted back across the lawn like she owned it. That night, I pulled out my HOA bylaws, the full binder of them, and read everything. Section 8 did exist, but it was vague and definitely didn't say anything about keys. It mentioned accessibility for communal safety inspections, which applied to shared fences, drainage, and utility boxes. Not private sheds. She was bluffing. So I filed a formal complaint with the County Housing Commission the next morning. I attached photos of the shed, the violation notice, and a scanned copy of the HOA's own bylaws. Now here's where things got real interesting. 2 weeks later, I came home to find a white sedan parked in front of Velma's house with County Housing Oversight stenciled on the side. A man and a woman in business attire were knocking on her door while she peeked through the blinds like a squirrel cornered in a birdhouse. I didn't say a word to her. Just walked past with a lawn chair and watched the show from my porch. Later that evening, I got a call from a neighbor, Vince, who told me the investigators had asked for board meeting records, financials, and documentation of all special inspections. Apparently, Velma had been demanding access to over a dozen sheds this year alone. And that wasn't the only thing they were looking into. Velma didn't wave at me the next morning. In fact, she turned and power walked the other direction when I stepped outside. I had a feeling this was just the start. 3 days after the county investigators showed up, I noticed something odd. The community bulletin board near the clubhouse had been wiped clean. Normally it was plastered with HOA notices and Velma's passive-aggressive memos about lawn height and unauthorized patio furniture. Now it was bare. No announcements. No minutes. Not even the usual flyer about the mandatory community spirit event she organized every other month. The silence was louder than any notice she could have posted. I spent that Saturday replacing a section of my fence when a neighbor, Janice from 2 doors down, came over holding a manila envelope. "I figured you should see this," she said without preamble. "They left it in my mailbox by mistake." Inside were photocopies of internal board letters, emails, mostly. Velma had printed them. One caught my eye immediately: begin drafting new addendum to justify access requests retroactively. Remove any mention of private property jurisdiction until legal clarification is obtained. Do not distribute until after next quarterly vote. "They're trying to rewrite the rules after the fact," I said. Janice nodded. "They've been doing it for years. Quietly. Most people don't read the amendment packets they vote on. Half the time they're buried in legal jargon. I scanned the rest. There were instructions to backdate inspection requests, notes about escalating fines to push non-compliant residents to sell, and even one thread where Velma suggested targeting high-equity homes for long-term benefit. High-equity homes. Like mine. I took this straight to the county housing office. The clerk didn't even blink before calling someone from the legal department. By Tuesday, subpoenas were issued. The board's entire email history was requested. Not just Velma's, but the treasurer's, the secretaries, all of them. That night, floodlights were on at the clubhouse. I walked past around 9 and saw people inside Velma pacing, the treasurer on his phone, folders strewn across the table. They looked like they'd been caught preparing for a hurricane that had already hit. The next morning, a notice was taped to every door in the neighborhood, this one printed on plain paper, no HOA letterhead. Effective immediately, all pending fines are suspended. HOA board operations are temporarily paused pending review by county oversight. That alone would have been enough to make most of us cheer. But then came the real hammer. 2 plainclothes officers and a woman in a navy blazer showed up later that week with a court order. I watched from my garage as they entered the clubhouse with a locksmith. 20 minutes later, they walked out with 3 laptops, 3 boxes of files, and the HOA's financial ledger. I caught up with the woman in the blazer as she was loading her car. "Find what you needed?" I asked. Her answer was simple. "More than we expected." Velma disappeared after that. Her car was gone from the driveway. No one had seen her walk her dog. A couple neighbors speculated she'd left town. I didn't care where she went, only that she stayed gone. But the situation wasn't over yet. A week later, I got a subpoena of my own, except this one wasn't bad news. I was being asked to testify before the county housing committee. They wanted a first-hand account of the key demand, the violation notice, and any other communications I had from the HOA. I brought everything. Emails, photos, even a video from my security camera showing Velma dropping off the notice and taking pictures of my backyard without permission. The committee was made up of 5 people. They listened. They asked detailed questions. They weren't just going through the motions. Near the end, one of them leaned forward. "Mr. Merrick, do you believe the HOA was using fines as a method to coerce residents into giving up property or access?" "I don't believe it," I said. "I know it. And I've got 2 neighbors with similar letters to prove it." They thanked me, told me they'd be conducting interviews with other residents. 2 days later, Janice and Vince both confirmed they'd been contacted. Then came the audit results. Turns out the HOA had been collecting special assessment fees for nearly 2 years, money that was supposed to go toward repaving the community's main roads. Not a single dollar had been spent on asphalt. Instead, the HOA's treasurer, Greg Walters, had moved nearly $20,000 into an account under a shell landscaping company. That company? Registered in Velma's maiden name. Now the police were involved. Real police. They showed up with a warrant, walked right into Greg's house, and walked out with 2 computers, a safe, and a smug-looking Greg in handcuffs. The charges? Fraud. Misappropriation of funds. Conspiracy to commit coercion. And the best part? That shed they wanted a key to so badly? I'd installed a second camera inside it a week after the first notice just in case. Guess who I caught trying to jimmy the latch one night at 2 in the morning? Velma. In a hoodie. With a flashlight. I turned that footage over to the county. Breaking and entering was added to the list. By the end of the month, the entire HOA board had either resigned or been removed by court order. A temporary administrator was assigned by the county. New elections would be held in 90 days. But until then, the community was free. The flags came back out. Kids played in the cul-de-sacs again. People grilled on their porches without worrying about smoke complaints. And as for my shed, I added a second lock. Not because I was worried. Just because I could. The moment things truly tipped was when the interim administrator, someone from the county named Angela Rivas, called a community meeting at the rec center. No pizza, no balloons, no fake cheerful energy like Velma used to force down everyone's throat. Just a microphone, a projector, and a stack of folders that looked like they'd been through a war. I sat in the second row between Vince and a retired Navy corpsman named Daryl who'd lived here since the subdivision was built. The room was packed. Folding chairs scraped the floor as more people squeezed in. You could feel it, that crackling mix of anger and curiosity, like everyone had just realized we'd all been robbed while we were busy mowing lawns and waving at each other. Angela stood at the front, calm but firm. Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. In the last 30 days, we have uncovered a pattern of financial misconduct, abuse of authority, and deliberate misrepresentation of governance, she began. I'm not here to speculate. I'm here to show you exactly what was found. She clicked the remote. The first slide was a scan check $5,000 made out to Greenfield Groundskeeping, the same company Velma's shell business operated under. Angela flipped to the next slide. This check was deposited into a personal account under the name Velma Whitmore. That's Velma Gregson's legal name prior to marriage. The address on file? A P.O. box registered in the next county. Vince leaned toward me. They really thought they'd never get caught. Angela kept going. There were dozens of checks, thousands of dollars, all siphoned through fake companies, padded maintenance, invoices, and fake consulting fees. But then it got worse. During analysis of board communications, we discovered a conversation indicating intent to alter property boundary records. Specifically, a GPS survey was commissioned privately by the board without informing homeowners. The goal was to reclassify certain parcels as shared easements to justify inspections and access. There was a low gasp from the back of the room. Angela went on. This is illegal. It's not only a violation of property rights, it constitutes fraudulent land manipulation. The county has already begun the process of reversing the attempted reclassification. Someone stood up. It was Mr. Hanley, an older man who rarely spoke at meetings. His voice cracked but carried. Are you saying they tried to steal parts of our land? Not just money but our actual property lines. Angela didn't blink. Yes. And they used HOA documentation to create the illusion of authority. That was the moment the mood turned from stunned to furious. Angela waited for the murmurs to die down before showing the next slide an image from the security footage I'd provided. Velma, in a hoodie, caught on my shed camera. Angela explained what had been found on the flash drive recovered from her house, blueprints of several homes marked with red X, including mine. Notes scribbled beside them, target equity, access priority, and in one case, possible legal challenge delay with fines. Angela didn't just tell us what was wrong, she brought action. The county has filed formal charges against 3 former board members. Velma Gregson is facing felony counts for fraud, attempted trespass with criminal intent, and conspiracy to alter legal documents. Greg Walters is being charged with embezzlement and falsifying accounting records. And Evelyn Cho, the former board secretary, is under investigation for knowingly participating in forgery related to the boundary reclassification. Someone asked if they would be arrested. Angela answered without hesitation. Velma has been located in a cabin 2 towns over. She was taken into custody this morning. The room erupted. Not with applause, it wasn't that kind of celebration. It was more like a collective exhale, like air returning to lungs that hadn't breathed right in years. After the meeting, Angela handed out a folder to every homeowner. Inside was a breakdown of their individual property lines, a timeline of the investigation, and a new voting ballot for the upcoming election of a permanent board. This time, every candidate had to pass a background check and submit a public platform. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. It was Daryl. He held a legal pad in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. I'm running, he said. I'm tired of watching this place get run by people who treat it like a private fiefdom. I've got an MBA, worked logistics during my service. I know how to manage people and budgets. You think I've got a shot? I looked him up and down. You're honest. You care. That's more than the last crew had combined. You've got my vote. Turns out he had a lot more than mine. By the time the ballots came back, Daryl had won with over 70% of the neighborhood's support. 2 other residents, a school counselor and a retired accountant, filled the remaining seats. No realtors. No developers. No one with a hidden agenda. They didn't waste time. The new board shredded the old fine system entirely. They eliminated vague addendums and hired a third-party mediator to review any future disputes. They opened the budget to public review and posted monthly statements online. For the first time, people actually showed up to meetings and stayed until the end. But the real shock came when Angela returned for a follow-up and revealed just how close we'd come to losing control of the entire neighborhood. There were early-stage plans to file for eminent domain-style claims on properties deemed non-compliant for more than 90 days, she said. The claims would have been routed through a private housing trust linked to a developer who'd been in contact with Velma's team. Had the fraud continued another 6 months, it's likely multiple homes would have been forced into arbitration. The room went dead silent. Angela closed her folder. The county is working with state legislators to tighten the legal boundaries of HOA powers. But this case is going to be used as a benchmark. Your documentation, your testimonies, they're already being cited. That hit me hard. We weren't just fixing our street. We were changing the rules. I went home that night and looked at my shed. The one they tried so hard to get into. I'd replaced the locks again, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that it was still mine. Every screw, every beam, every tool inside untouched. Still standing. Vince came by with a case of beer later. We sat on my back porch, watching the neighborhood settle into dusk. You know, he said, I always thought HOA stuff was just boring regulation nonsense. But they nearly stole this whole place out from under us. They underestimated us, I replied. Thought we'd fold when the letters came. He raised his bottle. To the shed. I raised mine. To never giving up the key. 3 weeks after the new board took over, I was working on a custom deck for a client across town when I got a call from Angela Rivas. She never called unless something serious was brewing. I need you to come by the county office this afternoon, she said. We've uncovered something bigger. You're listed in one of the documents. I put down my drill. Bigger than boundary fraud? Much. By 3 o'clock, I was in a room with Angela, a county records analyst named Maribel, and a state attorney I hadn't met before, a woman in a slate gray suit named Rachel Kintner. She had a box of files, each labeled with a different homeowner's name, including mine. Angela rotated a monitor toward me. This is a scanned contract from 6 months ago. It was buried in a folder labeled Archival Maintenance. She opened a document and zoomed in on a signature at the bottom. That's not mine, I said immediately. It says it is, Rachel replied. It's a forged consent form. According to this, you authorized the HOA to include your property in a communal access overlay, which would have allowed a third-party development firm to install underground utility lines through your backyard. Maribel clicked to the next page. Here's the kicker: the company listed as the utility contractor doesn't exist. We traced the EIN number. It's invalid. Rachel pulled a second document. We found close to 25 of these. All forged. All used in a proposal Velma submitted to a private development trust 6 months ago. Her plan was to turn the entire southern side of the subdivision into a shared-use corridor for a future luxury housing expansion. Without telling a single homeowner. Angela added the trust would have paid her a lump sum if the deal passed a silent compliance review. They were already drafting contracts when the investigation shut her down. I leaned back, stunned. You're telling me she was trying to sell our land to a developer by faking our signatures? Rachel nodded. And because it involved falsified property agreements across multiple parcels, it qualifies as organized real estate fraud. That moves it to the federal level. That explained why there were 2 unfamiliar agents waiting in the lobby when I left. Suits, briefcases, and very little expression. Things had officially crossed a new threshold. By the following week, the story hit local news, then state. The headline wasn't subtle. HOA leader charged in multi-lot forgery scheme. They even used the image of Velma being walked out of the cabin in cuffs. At the next board meeting, Daryl stood at the front of the room with a printed copy of the affidavit. This wasn't just about money or power. This was about theft at a scale we couldn't imagine. She tried to sell our homes without our knowledge. And if Lawson hadn't pushed back about that shed, we might never have known. He turned to me. Your stubbornness saved us. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. The room was quiet in a different way this time, not from shock, but from realization. People were awake now. Engaged. The board passed a resolution that night unanimously to permanently dissolve the HOA's authority over private property improvements. From now on, all modification disputes would go directly to a municipal zoning mediator. No more HOA fines. No more secret votes. No more clipboard tyrants. The ripple effects spread fast. The county created a new advisory panel made up of residents from 6 neighborhoods including me, Daryl, and Janice. Our job was to review HOA conduct across the county and flag anything that smelled even remotely like overreach. Rachel Kintner, the state attorney, followed through. She filed charges in federal court, 24 counts of wire fraud, 11 counts of forgery, and conspiracy to commit land misappropriation. Velma's trial was set for the fall. Greg Walters, the treasurer, took a plea deal in exchange for a full confession and documentation of how they'd manipulated the board elections for 3 years straight. But the best part? Every homeowner who'd been fined, harassed, or targeted by Velma's board received full restitution. The county froze the HOA's remaining accounts and redirected the funds. Even the interest was divided up. I got a check for $912, not life-changing, but symbolic. Like a receipt for justice. One morning in early August, I found a letter in my mailbox. No envelope. Just a folded page with my name scrawled in shaky handwriting. It was from Evelyn Cho, the former secretary. She wrote that she didn't know how deep the fraud went when she joined. That she'd been told the easement adjustments were temporary. She admitted she signed off on things she didn't understand. She asked for forgiveness not just from me, but from the neighborhood. I didn't know what to do with that. I folded it up and put it in the back of my filing cabinet. Later that month, I helped Vince rebuild his back patio. We tore up the cracked flagstone and laid down new pavers. As we worked, he looked up and said, "You ever think about running for city council?" I laughed, hard enough to drop a bucket of gravel. "Absolutely not." He didn't let it go. "You've got the head for it. And the spine." I shook my head. "I've got a shed. That's enough politics for me." Fall came. The trees turned, the air cooled, and the neighborhood finally felt normal, better than normal. Kids rode bikes without being chased down over helmet stickers. People painted their houses however they liked. A woman down the block put up a flamingo mailbox and no one tore it down. The community no longer lived under fear of fines or fake letters. The new board held open meetings on Daryl's driveway with folding chairs and coffee. People actually came because they wanted to, not because they were afraid not to. The shed still stood in my backyard, solid, locked, and untouched. I hadn't changed anything about it, but I found myself checking the locks less often. Not because they were unnecessary, but because I no longer expected anyone to come after them. One evening, as I was cleaning up from a job, I noticed my neighbor's teenage son walking across my lawn to return a hammer he'd borrowed. He stopped and looked at the shed. "That where it all started?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Funny, right?" He nodded. "Glad you didn't back down." "Me too." He handed me the hammer and walked off. Simple, quiet, honest. That was the kind of neighborhood we had now. No more keys demanded. No more fake notices. No more stolen authority hiding behind bylaws no one read. Just a street full of people who remembered what it felt like to stand up and win. And a shed that, without ever being opened, helped open everything else.